In the previous video we left off at my parents getting divorced. Now my mother is doing the single parent thing as my father isn't around much at this time. As you already know, my mother had given birth to me at the young of 16. So, as you can imagine, she didn't finish high school. With little formal education but a lot street smarts, my mother would tend bar at the local watering hole to make ends meet. This is where she would meet Big John, which to us was rather weird considering our father's name was John also. Big John is a used car salesman with white hair, a white beard, and balding on top of his head. Let me say that again, he wasn't balding, this dude was fucking bald on the top of his head. My siblings and I didn't like this asshole from the beginning, and I feel like he didn't like us much either. My mother and her new boyfriend would have a rather short courtship before picking up and moving us all about 4 hours from everyone and everything we knew. At first it wasn't bad. We moved to a very small town, population maybe in the hundreds. It was a little farming town in the Midwest. My mother seemed happy and there wasn't any violence. My mother and Big John would soon purchase and run a bar in the little farming town we lived in, followed by an arcade, which was cool for me. I kind of got instantly popular with the kids my age because of it. Up until that, there really wasn't anything for kids to do this little town we lived in. This is around the time that the first Nintendo came out, just to give you an idea. In the arcade we had pool tables, Super Mario Brothers, Pac-Man, Donkey Kong, and I can't remember the others. This is where I spent all my free time until I got into trouble. The town we lived in had a town square with the courthouse in the middle. On one side of the square was the bar they owned, and opposite the bar was the arcade. My mom had hired a teenage kid to run the arcade for her, as she couldn't be in two places at once, and I was only like 11 at the time. But I became quick buddies with the kid that ran the arcade. I think he had to have been around 16 or 17. At any rate, I was there one weekend night at closing time, when at about the time we should have closed, these girls and a couple of other dudes came in with alcohol. By the time we left the arcade I was so drunk. The teen my mom hired gave me a lift home, and he was worried with good reason. There is no way an 11-year-old kid is going to be able to hide being trashed from their parents. Funny thing about it, my mother didn't say shit to me that night. She woke my ass up at the crack of dawn though to start cleaning the toilet of all things. I was so sick, and she knew it. Fast forward to about a year after we moved to that little farm town where my mom would own a bar and an arcade. I am now around 12 years old, and my mother comes to me and says we are going to go back home, where we used to live, to visit our family, which is about a 4-hour drive. She says pack some clothes for the weekend. So, my little sister, brother, and I are pumped. We haven't seen our aunts, uncles, grandma, nobody in over a year. I will never in my life forget this trip. We had a station wagon, you know the one. Yet the one with the wood grain panels on the side. So, we all load up to go back home. Except Big John, he is staying to run the businesses. Now remember, I am about 12 years old at this time, and I notice that not only do we have the things we packed, but the whole back of the station wagon is full of big black trash bags. At this time, I am not even sure what's in those bags, but I would come to find out that in those bags was the rest of all our things. And that we weren't going to visit anyone. We were going to get dropped off at our grandmother's house. I would later learn years later that at that time my mother was living the fast life. They were addicted to cocaine, and I am sure they were also selling it out of the bar they owned. As a child I had no idea what cocaine was. We would end up living with our grandmother for over a year. Until my mother and Big John ended up moving back to where we had originally lived. And then soon after they moved back, my mom would end up leaving him. I held a lot of resentment towards my mother for leaving us like she did, until I got a little bit older and could understand that in her mind, she was trying to keep us safe. Thank you for sticking around to the end. All the stories I am telling are true depictions of my life. If you have enjoyed chilling beside the campfire and listening to my story, please take a moment to like the video. If you have any questions for me about my story, put it in the comment section below and I will answer your questions. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you are notified when I upload the next video, and stay tuned for the next episode. Convict Raised out.